All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Bernard Snow, and I'm from the Civic Education Software Division. And I'm very pleased to introduce Andy Pritchard, who's our Resources Director at Range High School, who's one of our Academy customers who uses our financial suite of software. Happy to take some questions later about the product, but I'll hand over to Andy to talk about his experience of why he selected us in the first place and the benefits that he's found in using our finance system within an academy environment. Thanks,
Okay,
Andy.
thank you. I mean, if I was going to talk about managing an independent budget, I'd probably need more than half an hour. For those who are finance orientated, you know it probably takes a lot longer than that to actually go through everything and all the problems you face when you're managing a budget. But the reason I have been asked today is actually to talk about the Civica resource financials that we use at Range High School. A little bit about myself. So it's Andy Pritchard. I have a grand title in School of Resources Director. Formby, if you don't know it, is in between Liverpool and Southport. We're probably about 3/4 of a mile away from the beach. So coastal erosion is a major problem at the moment in Formby, and we just hope we're going to stay dry. The reason why we use resource goes back really to December 2010, when the governor started talking about conversion to academy. At that time, I wasn't exactly sure what was involved in the conversion process and what life would be like after conversion. So I started doing a lot of research. I went out and visited a lot of schools out there that had already gone through the conversion process. We looked mainly at the likes of banking arrangements, payroll, and the sort of the conversion process itself, the legal side. And we didn't really give it much thought about the financial package that we would use on conversion, mainly because there was an assumption that we would convert using the package that we were having, but the academy version of it. We were used to using it. It's a national product. We didn't think there was going to be an issue. But what quickly came out when we visited all of the schools was that you operate as a company. And as operating as a company, there's a lot more pressure with regard to the financial reports that you produce. You have to submit accounts to Company House. There's VAT returns. That was new to me. But it then became an issue of whether or not the package that we were hoping to use was going to be up to the actual job itself. In April 2011, the governors took the decision to convert to an academy an academy. The conversion would be from the 1st of November the following year. So we had quite a lot of lead-in time. I spent a lot of time, again, visiting academies and looking at what packages they were actually using. And in about the 7 academies I went on visited, there was 4 packages that they were using. So what we did in school was we set up a governor's working party. We invited all 4 packages into school. We went through what the pros and the cons were. We evaluated each of the different systems. We then made a report to the full governing body, and a decision was made to actually purchase resource financials. And the reason for that, maybe it was the sales pitch was better, I don't know. But it was about functionality. And everything that was shown to us in the presentations, it was very apparent that the system itself was designed for an independent budget, and that was important. So we placed the order with Civica, and I think it was about the June, July. We were asked to provide them with a whole range of information with regard to our chart of accounts, a list of our suppliers, our debtors, and also our assets. And that information was used then to populate the actual package that we would get back closer to the conversion date. And so all the hard work, all of the legwork really was all done for us. The training was set up. We had 2 days worth of training, 10 days before we actually converted. When we were told that the training was actually going to be in-house, and to an extent, that took me back a bit, because it would have been easier to actually go to Civica's headquarters, and hopefully you had an IT suite where we could all sit down and we can all use it. But because of problems to try to release IT facilities in school for 2 days, the teachers wouldn't be too happy actually losing curriculum time in front of computers if you wanted to use a suite of a classroom just to get our hands on 3-4 computers. But the benefit was that when Civica drew up the database, they actually did a second database, and it was a training database, and it completely mirrored what the real-life database would be. Coming out to the school, okay, there was a bit of organisation. We set up a room with computers. But when they actually did the training, on the chart of accounts, on the suppliers, on the assets, etc., that we were going to use in real life. Because I'm sure you've been to many training sessions before where you've gone out, you've done the training, it all looks good, you know, you're all enthused, you go back to the school, and when you look at what you're going to be using, it bears no resemblance whatsoever to the real thing. So it was a big plus in the end, with hindsight. The package, the training was on site because of this mirror image. The training was for 2 days. I remember speaking to Andy, the trainer, and he said, what do you want to do first? And we'd actually told staff that we weren't going to be doing any ordering or any invoicing for a 2-week period. So it was very important to get the basics out the way. I had my finance clerk and my finance manager in the training with me. They had a stack of orders and invoices that needed to be processed. So we said, let's go for the basics. Let's get the invoicing, the ordering, the bank reconciliation done. So we spent 2 days going through, learning all the processes of actually going through and doing that. It was very bespoke to us. So we were placing training orders with companies that we knew about, where the actual catalogue was actually in the system. At the end of the 2 days, what Andy did with us is we went through the stationery that is actually on the system itself, because you will be generating remittance slips, you will be printing out checks. When you send an invoice out, you want to make sure that the letter-headed paper is correct, the format, you're using the right font, for instance. So we went through and made sure all that was ready. And then Andy disappeared for a number of days, and we were left to actually go through it. We started using it. I must admit, certainly for those 2 weeks, we had the manual next to us, pages well thumbed. Because when you introduce any new system into a school, there's always a time lag to get up to speed. And we were no different. 10 days after we converted, Andy came back to school for another day's training session. And we treated that like a snagging day, because within those 10 days, things would come up and we said, oh, how do you do that? I can't remember about that. Oh, should we print the checks off yet? Oh, I don't really want to do that. So we waited for Andy to come back. We went through all the queries that we had. We then went through and did our first check run, which I remember standing in front of the printer, and it was an inkjet printer, wondering which way did the checks go. Did they go upwards, downwards, towards you? We sorted that out. Printed off our first 24 checks, feeling really proud because previously everything went through the local authority. And then we did our first backs run, which also was very nerve-wracking because we'd never done a backs run before, and sending out the remittance electronically. But Andy was there to talk us all the way through the process, to hold our hand. And so at the end of that second lot of training, we were able to look back and think, yeah, we did that, we're up and running, we can make our own payments, we weren't subject to any delays that the local authority would put in our place. They had a policy of holding on to payments for 2 weeks regardless. So that went smoothly. Then we had the third lot of training. And the third lot of training was around the assets side of it. Because as an academy, as a company, you have to value the actual business itself. And part of that is the value of the assets. And although you may have 0 value assets within your establishment, they still need to go onto the system because they're there in case you have a fire, in case you have a break, and you can then go to see what is actually missing. So that was a whole day training session in itself, going through how we manage it, how we put things in, how we take things out, and also how we depreciate those assets that we have that have an effect on the balance sheet. And then the fourth lot of training was about reports. I was very conscious of the fact that it had been probably about 25 years since I did trial balances and balance sheets and income and expenditure analysis. And working for the local authority, they operate a completely different accounting system than what a company would do. So it was quite a nervous time. And I was nervous, but the governors were also nervous because they were going to be getting reports that they hadn't seen before. So it was very important for me to make sure that the set of accounts that I presented to the governors, they understood the format. And the biggest push for that was to make sure the headings were in the headings were in the name that they recognised, that they were in the right format, that they were in the same sort of font, for instance. So we went and we spent a lot of time going through and making sure that when we did those reports and we presented them to the governors, that they were able to understand that. Because at the end of the day, they're the people who are responsible for the finances of the school. My responsibility on a day-to-day basis, but it's their responsibility legally. So we spent a lot of time making sure the reports were all correct and in a format that they could understand. And that was 2.5 years ago. We've been in Academy now for 2.5 years. At the time when we converted, there were 6 other schools within the Sefton area that were going to convert at the same time. We all converted within about 2-3 months of each other. And not wishing to reinvent the wheel, we worked very, very closely with regard to, you know, if you were going to get a payroll provider out, we'd do it as a group. And when we looked at financial packages, we were the only school that took the decision to actually use the resources package. The other schools decided to stay with what they had, but to use the Academy version of it. Well, I think it's quite telling that 18 months after conversion, despite having to pay the big lump of money to this other organisation to buy the licences for this package, the 3 of the schools actually approached Civica and actually purchased the resource package themselves. Because at the point of them having problems, I remember sitting around the table, and it was a little bit embarrassing, sitting around the table, and they were saying, have you done the VAT report yet? Have you done the VAT report? So you put your first VAT claim in. I said, oh yeah, I've done it. And she said, oh, well, we can't, there's a bug, we've got to wait. And VAT is a big cost to the school, certainly, and it has a massive effect on cash flow. So of those other six schools, 3 of them have also gone over to Civica. From my point of view, 2.5 years on, the biggest plus is the fact it's the functionality of it. At the end of on the first working day of each month, I asked my 2 colleagues not to go into it. I'm able to do my bank reconciliation, my VAT return, and all my management accounts within a day. And that's because we spent a lot of time getting everything up and running. We're able to allow departments to input orders directly into the system. When we first suggested it, there was a bit of reluctance saying, oh, well, you know, what about the agreement with regard to reducing the teachers' workload, leaving teachers to teach? But a lot of the teachers, anyway, were writing out pieces of paper saying, can you please order this from Jenkinson's, and passing it through to the office, where they were actually able to go in and select what they wanted off a list of suppliers and out of a list of catalogues. Not only that, they would submit them through to be authorised. So it wasn't as if the order was then sent off. We still authorised them to make sure they had the money in their accounts. But they were also able to go into the system to actually see what the budget is up to, how much they've got left. Also to query what's being charged against them, because miscodings can happen. Or we can charge things to their accounts that we think should be their accounts when they've ordered a big buffet lunch for their staff at lunchtime, for instance, without letting me know. So they was able to do that. The VAT returns, as I said to you, are very, very straightforward. But the main reason for that is that within the resource package, it is very, very easy to copy and paste out of the package into Excel and the other way around. So when I come to do my VAT returns, I copy and paste the report into an Excel package where I'm able to check to make sure everything's got a VAT number, to make sure that the dates are all correct, because you'd be surprised how many invoices were dated January 2013 at the start of this new year, and make sure everything's spot on and that before we put the VAT return in. But also from the other side of it, when you actually come to do your budget, and cash flow is so important as an academy, to make sure you actually have the money in the account to pay all the bills, particularly when the teacher's salaries comes out towards the end of the month, which is the biggest cost. When you come to do your budget, you have to profile it. And I don't know a business manager who doesn't do the profiling within an Excel spreadsheet. And you do it and you base it on all the individual nominal codes you got. So you break it all down. So teacher salaries, the national insurance, the superannuation. That's the same 3 sort of entries for every other area of salaries. And then you profile it across 12 months. Under the old package, what we had to do is we had to go into each nominal code. We had to put in the budget. We then had to put in what the individual amounts were. It was really, really time consuming. And sod's laws, you got to the end of it and it didn't balance. So you had to go back and double check it all. With resource, provided that your columns match those columns actually within the software, it literally is a case of just copying it and pasting it straight in. And before it accepts it, it does a check to make sure that the department code and the nominal code actually match. For instance, I wouldn't want to charge teacher salaries to the arts department, but it might be a different kettle of fish charging them some for materials, etc. So it goes through and it does a check. So that's a massive plus. The fact that you can copy and paste, it saves you so much time to do it. But from my point of view, the biggest benefit is the time it saves me. I'm not IT literate, hence the reason I don't have PowerPoints going on. I did type that up on Word, but I employ IT network managers to actually do all the IT within the school. So what I want in front of me is a package that I can actually use that saves me time, that I'm not messing around with. Previously on the old package, I would have to do a report. It would take me maybe a day to number crunch it to put it in the format the governors wanted. But on this system now, I say the first day of the month, I know I've got everything balanced off, my bank reconciliations done, all my management reports are done. I can do the summary to the head teacher, and then I can then just park that job's done. Because my job is busy enough as it is. So I am standing up here, I am, I suppose, trying to be a sales director for Civica to say it's a fantastic package, but I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think it actually was. And I do believe that the role of the school business manager is hard enough as it is, because all the corridors seem to lead to my office, and all the problems seem to lead to my office, other than the teaching ones. But if you can use a package that makes your job easier, that frees you up on the time, and you're looking for one to do your accounts, seriously, I can't recommend the Civica Resources Financials enough.